have some tea out of my from my show merch mug. Mm, you're here. Look, I'm drinking out of a Betrayal mug for the moment, for the occasion, to mark the moment. Tea Hids. Tea Hids. Tommy, how are you?
Lovely to see you.
Oh, what a treat to see you. It's been too long.
It's been a long time. It's been a year and a half.
Yeah, crazy. You've been busy.
I want to check. Can you hear me okay?
You're a little quiet. You're a little quiet. But
oh, no. If I put headphones in, I think I've got such an old phone. If I put headphones
we can hear
in,
you though.
Offended because then I think
I'm pretty sure we can hear you. That's better. That's better. But
okay.
Let's see if Arthur, our friend Arthur, our hero behind the scenes of tonight, is. Let's talk again, Tommy.
One,
yes.
Two, 1 2
hey.
1 2.
Perfect.
So is it weird if I keep a headphone in? So I feel like I'm being. I saw you earlier.
No, you look cool.
A theatre director and Instagram Live is an interesting.
I know.
An interesting equation.
It is, but maybe I'll get better. Maybe I'll get better at doing it.
Okay.
It sounds good. I was thinking
One or two. Is that for sound? I mean, does that sound to you?
I think it's the same. So whatever's most comfortable.
I mean, at this point.
I love it. Tom, this has been such a huge journey, isn't it? I mean, it's like.
By the way, it's amazing to see everybody involved, to see Sutra and Eddie and Charlie and Zoe, and hear all their recollections and remembrances. It was such an extraordinary time that I think of often in this past year of lockdown and the fragmentation of our social bonds and not seeing anybody and isolation. And the whole point of theatre is about connection and telling stories that connect us in a building, and we're all sitting in the same building. It's sort of, so I've thought about this whole experience a lot in the last year.
Yeah, no, I bet me too. Of course, it started as a gala performance. I remember,
yes.
As I was saying earlier, we did the Pinter season, celebrating or marking the moment of commemorating 10 years since Harold's death, by doing all of his short plays and then doing a charity gala in which you had to raise thousands for Amnesty on that night, which I'm very grateful for. But we ended up doing, of course, a scene from Betrayal, and that's how it started.
That's how it started. Amazing to think that was the spark of the first idea. I was so honored that you asked me to do it. It was an amazing evening that evening. I remember it very well. What was it, October the 18th?
It was on his birthday, yeah. That's right, his birthday.
His birthday, or October the 21st? From memory. 18th, yeah, the 18th.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
And you were in the middle of this extraordinary season of Pinter at the Pinter Theatre in London. And it was a huge celebration for... Oh, hang on. Sorry, my phone's wanting... 1 second, sorry.
Sorry, you're getting text messages. Your mate saying,
"No,
are you on Instagram Live?"
Sorry. Yes, this amazing thing you did, which was to celebrate his work in the presence of Antonia Fraser, his widow, and there was all these actors who have had some connection or relationship to Harold Pinter over different generations. I remember some former members of Betrayal casts throughout the years. Jeremy Irons was there, who obviously played Jerry in the film, and Sam West, who played Robert at the Donmar Warehouse. Simon Russell Beale had done the Hot House, and who else was Indira Varma? Was she there?
Indira and Papa Edu, yes,
and
really amazing.
She had done some Betrayal, I think. Emma. In days gone by. Anyway, it was an extraordinary evening of celebration of his work, and Lee Evans was there, and it's very funny. And you asked me to do this scene from Betrayal, scene 5, between Robert and Emma, where Robert discovers, or has discovered, in a hotel room in Venice, that Emma's been having this affair with Jerry. But it's the most extraordinary confrontation. It takes about 10 pages, which isn't a confrontation at all. It's an invitation to admission. But I do remember it was this Harold Pinter's such a comedic gift. Some of his plays they're very deep and very profound, and about love and loss and power, and in an evening full of a lot of laughter, this had this extraordinary quality of silence in the room. And we rehearsed it for 10 minutes, I think.
Less than that, maybe, yeah.
That. And it was really interesting, just because we read it, obviously, we read it in front of microphones. And afterwards, I remember Antonia Fraser saying to both of us, perhaps you'd like to do the whole thing. And it suddenly was a very exciting idea, because it's such a beautiful play. I'd read it when I was at drama school. I'm fascinated by its kind of brilliance and its structure. I've always been. I became age appropriate faster than I thought I would, but that's the nature of age. It feels like I read it and thought, oh no, that's a long time away before I'm the right age for that. But yes, and then I remember you being at the table with Antonia, and Antonia saying, perhaps you'd like to do the whole thing, and you leaning across and going, well, maybe we should do the whole thing. and I went away and read the whole thing, and then I think quite quickly we were on, weren't we?
Well, I remember speaking to you literally the next day. I think I sent you the play the next day, and then the day after that, I think we sort of pretty much said, let's go ahead and do it.
Yes.
Amazingly, we were all available, and that the Pinter was free, so that we could do it as a continuation of the season. And that's kind of this sort of magic. It was so effortless. Things aren't always like that, are they?
It never happens like
life.
that. It never happens.
Often there are obstacles. Whereas, and also I remember us talking about who should play Jerry, and that we had both thought of Charlie, and he wasn't originally available. Do you remember? And then
yes.
And then he then became available. It was almost like kind of, wow, this kind of karma of this is just kind of amazing.
It was extraordinary. Yeah, it never happens that way, where all the people you want to be involved, and it happens without, almost as if the road was already paved in some way. Extraordinary magic and a very auspicious beginning. And I can't believe it turned into almost a year and a half, or in terms of our preparation, but a full year of performance of this one singular play. And
I think it was like over 270.
272, I think it was. I may have misremembered that, but it was 12 weeks in London, 17 weeks in Broadway, and to do the same thing 272 times is an extraordinary act of repetition and investigation, in that every time you do it, you find something else. Like playing a great piece of music, you think, oh, this movement is, by the way, I can't play great pieces of music, so I don't know why I've used this analogy, but
just keep going.
But it's taking little moments or little motifs or riffs, I suppose, that recur through the course of a piece. And I imagine in that repetitive recitation, you find more depth every time. And that's certainly my experience with this play, was that I would start to almost feel the structure. I would sort of feel the structure of the play like a physical entity. You feel like you're inside, you're under the hood, as it were, of the car. You're inside the engine. You just know exactly how the engine works. And the more time you spend with it, the more connections you can make. And that's the end of my mixed music and automobile metaphor.
Is it you? I don't think you had done Pinter before. I don't think you've
been. No, I'd never done Pinter professionally. No, I'd done a bit at school.
Right. When were you surprised? Were there any particular demands? That, being in a Pinter play, what are the demands of being in a Pinter play? What does he require you to do? What was the what was interesting about doing his work?
Everything. I mean, he has an extraordinary ability to excavate under the surface of things, under the surface of words, actions, and behavior. And he, I think, is a very much a playwright, probably of the English psyche. I hope he wouldn't object to that. In fact, that's unfair. I think it's a human thing. It's beyond the national identity. But what I was thinking of when I said that is some playwrights, older playwrights, Elizabethan playwrights, where the meaning lies within the words. If you're doing a Shakespeare play, the characters tell you what they're feeling often, in the most beautiful poetry. And they say what they mean. Whereas Harold Pinter's characters, the meaning lies beneath what they say. Characters often don't say what they mean. They say something that's in conflict or contradiction of what they mean. And the great joy of playing Pinter is that you're doing both at the same time. So you're investigating the subtext, or as you and I used to call it, the subwoofer.
I love the subwoofer. It makes so much sense. The
subwoofer, yeah. But there's a bass line that underneath, to carry on my musical analogy, there's a bass line underneath everything, which you need as an actor to tune into, a kind of frequency of things that are under the surface, which are primal and deeply human. And they are about love and loss and grief and betrayal and power and desire, all these incredibly human things that we experience, and a part of the experience of being alive. And over the top of that subwoofer, that bass line, are these melodies and grace notes, which often are, in contradiction of what the bass line is, which makes it a very fascinating acting challenge, because you have to summon what's underneath. You have to summon the subtext, and it could be extraordinary pain, extraordinary loss or suffering. But you also have to play what's on top of it, which can often be very light, very dexterous, very civilized, very well-mannered, charming or comedic. So at any moment in the Pinter play, a character could be charming and menacing, or seductive and in retreat. And those are thrilling tensions to play within Pinter, and no less in Betrayal, in these complex dynamics between these very complex people, Robert, Emma, and Jerry.
Yeah, amazing. I think one of the we're so used to kind of thinking about Harold's plays as being about the battle for supremacy, this kind of like these kind of power battles, this kind of and this kind of menace. But actually, it's interesting that I think what was really remarkable about your performance was this kind of real connection to the loss and the pain underneath it, and your ability to really go to those, plummet to those depths, was just kind of remarkable. And I seem to remember you saying that the clues in the text, which
I think
why.
Yeah,
why
there are so many. There are clues in the play. Always listen to the playwright. He'll tell you what you need to know. The play is called Betrayal, and that's the first clue. Is an actor diving into that, you have to go, okay, what does that mean? Betrayal is painful as an experience, and there are all sorts of ways betrayal can emerge in your life. You can betray yourself, you can betray another, you can betray a lover or a friend, you can betray your ideals, you can betray someone's trust, and so there was already I think I love that excitement of having to dig around in this very profound human feeling. And particularly Robert, what I always found in that first reading at the gala was that here was this incredibly controlled, on the surface at least, a very controlled, charming, collected man who was intelligent and professional. He was successful in his life, a respected publisher, and underneath the carapace or the facade of that composure is someone whose soul is completely shattered. And so the challenge was to present that, the mask of control, but also investigate the vulnerability behind the mask. And one of the big clues I always found was this conversation between Robert and Jerry in the fourth scene about whether boy babies or girl babies cry more. And there's one way of reading it, which is that, because at this point the audience knows that Robert knows that Jerry's had an affair with his wife, and so there's a lovely dramatic irony and tension between what's happening on stage and what's happening in the audience, and the audience is aware, like, what's Robert going to say, because he knows. And Jerry has come over to Robert's house, so there's this truth that's hanging in the air which hasn't been spoken, which is an affair with the woman upstairs or wherever she is. We never specified it. And Robert gives Jerry a drink, and that's right, she's just putting Ned to bed. So Emma is putting their son to bed. Or is it their son? There's a paternity question in scene 5. When he finds out the affair's been going on, he says, "How long?" And Emma says, "5 years." And Robert says, "5 years." Pause. Ned is 1 year old. So there's already a challenge to the actor. What does that mean? Robert has to do the math. Who's the father of our son? But in the previous scene, Emma's putting Ned to bed, and Robert decides to start discussion with Jerry about boy babies and girl babies. Isn't it true that boy babies cry more than girl babies? Wouldn't you say? And Jerry's a bit perplexed, certainly in Charlie's, my esteemed colleague's performance. He sort of doesn't understand why this interrogation is happening. But I always thought that was a clue about Robert. It's Pinter telling you that Robert, this boy baby, cries, and he cries painfully and deeply. But when across the course of a performance do you show that stuff? So yeah, that was over the 17 weeks in New York. The pleasure of it was that there are these, the music of Pinter's play is so precisely delineated and so carefully mapped, and to play it from the beginning to the end every night was a pleasure. It was never the same, and the audiences themselves would bring their own experiences in. Every individual and every audience brings in a life experience which they are carrying with them into their perception of the play. And then there's an alchemy which happens between all those individual members of the audience to create a character of the audience that we can feel across the footlights. We can feel what the energy is, and that's a thing that is unique to being in a theatre, to the live
performance, and also the kind of unpredictability of that, isn't it? I mean, that's what's so amazing, as you say, like the kind of depths of what you all achieved, but also we also had a lot of fun, and also, as we said earlier, like
that was great.
Harold himself saying that the plays are all kind of comedies, that they're all very, very funny, witty plays, and sometimes things can go a little bit awry as well. Right? Sometimes things can go a bit wrong.
Yes. Well, of course,
was there anything that kind of was? I mean, I know that there were. I read them in the show reports. I don't know if everyone knows that. The end of every performance, our brilliant stage managers always write down, what went on, so that directors, producers, and all the rest of it, and the rest of the creative team can kind of see what happened. And there were definitely some things that were quite interesting. Do you have any particular?
Oh, endless. I mean, endless. That for me is the thrill of the live event, of the theatre, is that I still get the thrill of it as an actor and as an audience member myself, which is, this is happening right now. It's not happening before, it's happening in front of me. I can see it, I can hear it. There's an atmosphere in this room. I can sense it in some way. And it's so thrilling. It's thrilling to feel it. I think audiences respond in different ways. And of course, things go wrong on film and television all the time. And I'm so lucky that I've been able to do that as well. And occasionally you get a blooper reel. But when things go wrong in the theater, everybody's there to witness it. And there's a kind of magic about that moment, because it reminds you that it's live. It reminds you that real life is spontaneous, and that spontaneity is really the source of so much. God, I mean, I suppose the things that the constant challenge for me was with this melon in the seventh scene, which I think Eddie mentioned. I mean, so many things about that scene can go wrong. Already the stakes are extremely high. Robert and Jerry have agreed to meet up for lunch. The question in the audience's mind is, will Robert confront Jerry with the confession that he knows about the affair between, and these two old friends are meeting for a civilized lunch in an Italian restaurant. And there's something in Robert's suppression of his pain and anger and fury, which gets displaced into, firstly, the waiter, the great Eddie Arnold, but then the food that they're eating and the wine that they're drinking. And so I don't know how this came about in rehearsals, but something, because in the text, of course, Robert's anger is displaced into a tirade about the demise of modern prose literature, and how there's two men of books and letters. Jerry's a literary agent, Robert's a publisher, but modern prose literature isn't what it used to be, and it's certainly no comparison to the great poets, W.B. Yeats in particular. And at the same time, they're eating these starters, I suppose, slices of Meloni, or prosciutto and Meloni in Robert's case, and drinking excessive bottles of Corvo Bianco, which you have to make sure as an actor you've got drunk, so that by the time you ask for more, you've drunk it. So it is a technical challenge, but this melon, I would occasionally, the sort of Robert's aggression would be taken out on this piece of melon, and depending on the ripeness of the melon on any particular day, it was a very slippery scene partner. At one point, I think Eddie mentioned it went in a sort of perfect mathematical arc into my wine glass. Yeah. At one point, it went into the audience, which I think was a bit of a surprise for the front row. So, like, someone got there was one occasion. Yeah, someone sort of landed his piece of melon lands in the lap, It's like extra dimension to the performance.
I'd sell it on eBay, quite frankly. I'd be making some money out of that.
There you go. But there was one where I was in the middle of this rant about modern prose literature, and the melon slipped off I stabbed it with the knife, and it slipped off the fork, and it went onto the floor, and instinctively I just pushed my chair back and bent over and picked it up and ate it. And I heard this extraordinary gasp from 1,100 people, 1,200 people, over 1,000 people. Get a sort of like, ooh, and the noise of 1,000 people gasping is significant. And then I looked into the eyes of my esteemed colleague Charlie Cox, which were very twinkly, because he sort of couldn't believe, A, that this piece of melon had slid onto the floor, B, that I had picked it up and eaten it straight away, and that it had got this reaction from the audience. And then it looked like we might both lose contact with the play and lose contact with the scene, because I love Charlie so much, and we've experienced so much together, but he's one of the few actors in the world who, if he starts to laugh, he's got the malicious laugh, and I could see laughter rising in him. I thought, oh no, I'm not going to be able to finish the scene. And there was a pause, And then the audience clocked that exchange between us, and they laughed. And then I think Charlie turned to them and pointed at me, and they laughed again. And I turned back and had to look down to compose myself. and I can't remember how it was broken. We both took a sip of wine at the same time, and then there was a spontaneous round of applause. But I think, you know, apart from just, you know, something going wrong, I think the applause was nothing to do with us, really. It was the audience's delight that they were watching something which was live and real, that they were witness to it, and they were included in this magical moment which didn't happen the night before and wasn't going to happen the next night. And I feel that that's the best thing about live theatre. And there's